Welcome back to The Remote Worker. My name is Han Talbot, also known as Han Mixed World, and today we'll be chatting with Katie Uniacke. Katie is a freelance translator and copywriter. Originally from the UK and now living full-time in Spain, language learning has played a big part in Katie's journey to remote living and how she came to choose the work she has. In this episode, we talk about the logistics of moving abroad, choosing which clients to work with, and how Katie would go about learning a new language from scratch today. So grab a coffee, a tea, or something stronger, and let's get started.
So, Katie, thank you so much for being on the Remote Worker podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. A bit hot, although it's relatively cool in the cave, but outside it's pushing 40, so...
Yeah, do you want to tell people where you are, where you're based?
So I'm based in the south of Spain, in Granada, in a little cave house, very little. Yeah, it's a lovely place to live, even if it is a bit cosy with two of us in here and a dog. But yeah, high summer at the moment, so...
Definitely not jealous at all.
Loving it. Yeah, it's great.
Amazing. Well, should we start off with you telling us a little bit about your journey into freelancing? And because you do translation and also copywriting and a bit of bits and pieces, right? So do you want to just explain that to us, connect the dots for us?
Yeah, sure. So I studied languages at University of Southampton, just like you, Spanish and Portuguese. And then it was on my year abroad in Brazil that I did some travel blogging and I really enjoyed that. And then I kept doing some writing for the university newspaper and things whilst I was in my final year. And then my cousins ran a copywriting agency. So I just got talking with them at a family gathering and they were like, well, we could always use help for really simple blogging work. So would I be interested in giving it a go? And so I ended up writing articles for them about things like rabbit hutches and concrete and all kinds of fun things that all beginner copywriters do. And that's when I hadn't even really thought about anything. I didn't know what copywriting was. I'd never really thought about translating, despite doing a language degree. But I started looking around online for translation work, and I ended up just on some real content mill kind of sites like Fiverr and Upwork, doing some translation work for next to nothing at all. But then I finished up with university, and then I got a placement in Mexico, which was just a 12-hour-a-week job at the University of Colima, again in the middle of nowhere. And that meant that I had all the spare time and I was already earning money from teaching at the university. So I had all the spare time to really build up my copywriting work and my translation work. And by the time I got to the end of that year, I'd really built up a solid client base so that it was kind of feasible for me to go back to the UK, actually starting to make it a serious business and taking it a bit more seriously myself. And then I moved out to Spain at the beginning of 2018. And that's kind of when it's kind of all been uphill from there. So, yeah, that's the basics of it.
Love that. So what is one thing when you were first starting out, either post-graduation or even back in 2018 when you said you were going to start creating this as a serious business, what is one thing that you wish you had known when you'd started out?
Well, firstly, I was in a position to be charging very little because I didn't really have any outgoings. And in Mexico, you can live very well for next to nothing. But I shouldn't have accepted the rates that I did for so long. Because, when I look back at some of the rates I charged for some of the projects I did, I'm like, wow. But also to invest in my business, because those first 2 years, 3 years probably, until about 2019, I didn't really properly invest in my business in terms of branding, marketing, courses. And I just kind of taught myself a load of stuff, created my website all on my own, but it took hours and I went through some headaches that if I just got someone else to do it for me, I could have saved so much time and so many headaches. So the main thing is to, once you do have some income coming in, to then start putting it back into your business slowly but surely. And then, because things start accelerating an awful lot quicker once you start putting that investment into it, definitely.
Sure. No, that's really good advice, actually. And I know for myself, there are quite a few videos online. I know there are quite a few videos online that say, do stuff for free or, do stuff for cheap, which is great if you've got, for example, say a side job like you did back in Mexico.
Yeah.
And then, that works as a portfolio. But I feel then it's kind of when you stop doing those and then like go on to actually charging what you know you're worth. For sure. What would you recommend for upskilling, or for instance, like you mentioned marketing, building a business? Were there any particular sites that you used or courses that you used to kind of get yourself moving?
One of the big investments I made in 2019 was a big SEO course, which for copywriters is a really, I knew the basics of SEO. I'd been working with some SEO clients, but to really probably get to grips with it, I did a big, it's called the Recipe for SEO Success. It's an absolute information. She's based in Australia. And
so what was that? Yeah, what was her name? Sorry,
Kate Toon.
Oh, okay, cool. And she's based in Australia, did you say?
Yeah, she's based in Australia, and she's a real kind of SEO guru, but very accessible kind of guru. Not one of the ones like you're going to earn 6 figures in 2 months if you know.
No shit.
So yeah, I like that a lot, and it's all very. So just courses are a great place to invest your money, I would say, because they just make you feel so much more confident. Take away that classic imposter syndrome feeling that we all go through. Because even if you do already know a lot of the stuff, it just reinforces it and just makes you feel a lot more confident.
Nice. And then what particular things were you referring to when you said about outsourcing to people?
Outsourcing for me is mainly finances, having an accountant.
Right.
And I also, these days I use a special like client management software for translators called LSP Expert. And that's a paid tool. It's not outsourcing as such, but it does take away so much of the stress of managing jobs and invoicing. So that was a great investment. And then I have my accountant who takes care of the rest. And especially in Spain, that is absolutely vital because the tax system over here is, I will kind of begin to understand it.
Right, that makes total sense. When you moved abroad, was there anything that you had to particularly take into consideration all of a sudden because you're now in Spain?
I wasn't particularly good. I mean, I didn't have that many outgoings and expenses before I moved here because I wasn't really investing in my business. But I wasn't doing an amazing job at keeping track of receipts and invoices and everything for those expenses. Whereas here, you have to keep a very detailed record because you have to send off every single receipt and every single invoice that you send to clients. That has to all go off to the tax man because they don't trust you out here. They're not willing to take it on.
Oh my goodness.
You take you at your word.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting because I feel like, especially for a lot of remote workers, I don't know about you, but I've definitely seen a big trend for people wanting to remote work now and go abroad while they work. Like even if they work with their full-time employer now, they still I read pieces last year where people are like, oh yeah, I spent a month in Italy or a month in Spain, and still worked my work was still in the UK. So I wonder have you got any advice for people who are looking to, that initial step, like, oh my God, I've just landed off the plane. I need to find somebody to help me with my taxes, to help me with all this legal stuff. How did you go about that? Like, just give us a brief.
Just asking for help, asking for recommendations. There's amazing communities, or if there's Facebook groups and Twitter, LinkedIn. There's great communities out there, and if you just ask, you can feel a bit shy, being like, "Oh, I'm new here, I don't know what I'm doing," but people are always really happy to help.
Nice.
My accountant was a recommendation from I think it was a group of expats in Granada, and that's always the best way so that you're not feeling in the dark.
Great. Cool. What drew you to the remote lifestyle? I mean, languages degree, doing a year abroad, that we all get the taste, I feel, once we've done that. But what was it that kind of spoke to you, right? Because you kind of probably, you see people kind of going down what we might call the traditional 9-to-5 route, going on to grad schemes, going on to different jobs based in different parts of wherever. What drew you to go, no, that's not for me, and go into the lifestyle that you have?
I think, as you said, in a way, it was just kind of the lifestyle that I had as a student, studying languages and then the year abroad and all of it. It gave me an awful lot of freedom. And although we did obviously have lectures and things to work around, a lot of the year you don't have classes and you can be working from anywhere and you're organising your own time and kind of your own boss already when you're a student, because you are having to, keep your ducks in a row and stay on top of things. So it was almost kind of a continuation of that. And then it just fell into place with getting when I was in my first couple of years at uni, I thought I might go into charity work, like NGOs, that kind of thing, because I was doing lots of volunteering and things at uni. But as I started doing the bits of freelancing here and there, it was just kind of seemed a non-brainer. And I was like, well, why on earth would I not do this? Like, if I can keep traveling, keep living where I want to be, keep using my languages, and it's a challenging career as well, and it's fulfilling, and it's so and like, why would I do anything else?
No, it makes total sense. And so tell us a little bit about kind of your business mission now. So obviously you prefer to work with sort of eco-friendly feminists, did I read that as well? Feminist brands that are kind of more about sustainability and being kind and what have you. What drew you to those particular brands and how did you go about picking them?
Obviously, any freelancer, you have your niches, but I'm not going to sit here and say that all my work is always for wonderful feminist, vegan, eco-friendly brands. I just try not to. I love it when I do get the work for those brands and those people, but I also just try not to work with brands that are actively doing damage to the planet. When I was in my first couple of years of freelancing, I did, you do just take any work that comes your way. And I remember doing some translations at one point for a Brazilian mining company. And then the following week, seeing that they'd been responsible for this massive dam collapse and absolute devastation. And I was like, why aren't we doing that anymore? And I had to then give all of the money I'd earned from that to Amazon, charity work in the Amazon, just because I felt so terrible that I'd been complicit in their in that destruction.
It was a journey.
Yeah, it is. And, having been so lucky to travel so much and really see the impact, the plastic pollution there is, and in these incredible places in Latin America and things, and it's just like, well, I at least want to be not having a negative impact on the planet as much as I can, and just try and make those small differences to both my personal life and my professional life. And now I am fortunate enough to be in a position where I can be picky about who I do want to work with, because it is easy to say, I only work with sustainable brands, when you actually have a choice of work. But if you're just sitting there with an empty inbox and looking at your bank account slowly draining, then it's not so easy to say no to those companies that are less than ethical.
Sure, absolutely. I feel like there is also a much bigger trend now also to go in what I keep calling kind travel and kind living, but it's just because that's what seems to be the name for it. But sort of more sustainable, more green, for want of a better word, companies and missions and projects. For somebody who would like to go down that route, do you have a place that you go to specifically to find these people, or any particular methods that you use to find these brands, I guess?
There are specific job boards and things for things. There's one called Work for Impact, which is quite new, but from what I've seen and the reviews I've heard, they are doing good things. I'm just very anti-job board these days because it's such an effort, filling in those profiles. And it is very worth it at the beginning when you don't have any work. But once you get to a certain point, just having another profile somewhere else and another, it's just too much hassle. So really the place that I would say is just LinkedIn. It is an amazing place for just connecting with other people that care about the same causes as you do, and also just letting people know that is your niche, even before it becomes one of your main niches and you're actually getting a lot of your work in that niche. That doesn't mean that you can't share content related to those ideal niches that you want to work in. That people sometimes feel, I'm lying because I'm not actively, it's not what I do entirely. I'm actually spending most of my time writing about rabbit hutches, but I would love to write about. It's, you do just kind of have to just start putting out there what you want to be receiving. And LinkedIn it used to be obviously just such a boring, dry horrible place. And now it's can be a really nice place to build a lovely community and get recommendations as well if you are putting that content out there. Then other people that are in your network will see what you're sharing, and that's your niche and that's your thing. And when they see a post that's relevant, like a job opportunity, or a client comes to them that that's not their thing, or they're too busy, then they'll pass that on to you.
Cool. Nice. It sounds like you tend to network more face to face as well, like obviously pre-pandemic and all the rest of it, but do you not? Sorry, is that a massive kind of assumption? Are you more of a go meet local communities and network there, or do you do it online, or are you a co-workspace person?
I have tried a couple of co-working spaces in Granada, but then we started fostering dogs and I started just spending my time. Yeah, in general, I did, obviously pre-pandemic, try and get out to some in-person things. In Granada, there's not a massive like entrepreneurial or freelancing community, so there wasn't all that much going on. So it has been more online than anything else, even though it would be lovely to be able to meet more people in person. But there is so much you can do online, and obviously it's just gone from strength to strength in the last year and a half now that people can't network in person.
Absolutely, that makes total sense. But also just talking about networking and community and things like that, what are your thoughts on being multilingual and living and working remotely? I know for me personally, I've found it pretty beneficial, like a skill to have. I don't know what your thoughts are or your take.
I have only lived and worked remotely in Mexico and now Spain, and I've had some other trips. I was in the US for a while, but so it has all been Spanish since I've been freelance, so all the Spanish-speaking countries that I have been in for extended period. And it has, I can't even imagine what it would have been like if I didn't have the language skills, because it is just totally transformational. Like the amount of friends that I've made and people that I've met that I never could have communicated with because they don't speak any English, especially like the proper deep friendships. And I had a good friend of mine I made here 3 years ago when I first moved here. It was a lovely Dutch girl. She found herself a gorgeous cave with views of the Alhambra here in Granada, and it was stunning. But she was so busy with work and she didn't know any Spanish at all. But she didn't have the time to dedicate to the Spanish, and it meant that she was here for probably 7 or 8 months, and she never kind of got that connection with the city and the people, and she just found it all a bit stressful and overwhelming. And she ended up moving on, and she's carried on with her travels and she's having a great time. But just kind of seeing that difference of what having a language has done for me has been amazing. And I think I would now find it hard to travel in a country where I don't speak the language or live and work, because I just feel so powerless, because I'm used to being able to communicate, and so out of practice now, what we haven't been able to travel probably obviously for so long. I'm not used to that feeling anymore. But if you can at least pick up a little bit of the language if you're traveling somewhere, then 100% do your best, put those hours in and get at least to grips with the basics before you go somewhere, because it will absolutely transform your experience, even if it is just the basics, because in the majority of countries, people don't expect you to speak their language at all. So if you can just say please and thank you and how much, they will absolutely just so appreciate the effort that you're making, and that even that can transform your experience somewhere.
100% agreed. I honestly, I'm the same. I don't know how, like business aside, I don't know how I could go to certain countries now and not be able to speak Spanish or Portuguese, or even some small bits of the French A level. It's just one of those things, isn't it? Like, it's just being able to connect with people in a way that, unless you also do have tried to learn the language and succeeded in a situation, I find you don't quite realise just how connected you can get.
Yeah, that next level. And when I was in Brazil for my first year abroad, I would see these English backpackers going around with literally not a word of Portuguese. And I was living and working in a touristy spot, but none of the Brazilians spoke a word of English. And I was just looking at these backpackers being like, I admire you, really, because I would find that terrifying, that you literally can't communicate at all. Like, you just must feel lost constantly, but they seem fine with it.
I 100% agree. And especially for places that aren't popular or, on the typical tourist trails. Like, like even where I was in South Brazil, it was popular for students. But again, I was one of 2 Brits in this university. And even and the American exchange program was completely separate to our exchange. So it was literally being thrown in the deep end and being expected to pick it all up as you go along. And if you spoke Spanish, I don't know about you, but I found if I spoke Spanish, it was like we don't do that here. Like, that's offensive. Yeah. No, 100%. So obviously, school aside and whatnot, so what are your top tips for either picking up a language or keeping up a language? I feel like a lot of people say there's picking up is one thing, but keeping it up maybe. So whichever one.
Well, in terms of picking up a language, I would definitely say that having those actual classes and that solid grounding of grammar when you first get started, even if you just go to an evening class, if you really are serious about picking up a language, you do need that grammar at the beginning, because it just gives you that foundation. And then if you then throw yourself into a situation where you're immersed in the language, you will just absolutely soar, because you do have that base and you understand how the language works. But if you just immerse yourself in a language and you actually have no idea, then it'll just take so much longer, because it's just that your brain can't process anything of what's going on around you. It doesn't have a framework to work with. And then in terms of maintenance, I'm just all about Netflix. I live here in Spain. I don't get much of a chance to speak Portuguese. So the majority of my Netflix consumption is in Brazilian Portuguese. And even if a series is filmed in Norway or Italy or wherever it is, then I just go straight into Portuguese. It doesn't have to just be Brazilian content, although obviously that's great for the cultural side of things. I mean, the best thing that's happened to me all week has been the launch of Too Hot to Handle Brazil on Netflix.
I'm in two minds about that programme. I'm in two minds. I don't know if it's because Love Island is just not living up to the thrill at the moment, but I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit like, yay, when that came on Netflix as well.
That's great. A real kind of insight into how Brazilian culture's developed since I was last there 7 years ago. But
absolutely,
so Netflix all the way. Just use it. Make your entertainment your CPD, continuous professional development.
Love that. So as an adult, a professional adult, because obviously you've done a languages degree and you've been studying it for years and years and years. But what's one language that if you had the space now, you would love to learn fresh?
I've always wanted to learn Italian. Ooh. I don't know, it's the same as, it's just kind of the Spanish, Portuguese, Italian triangle. And it would be so much easier for me, or easy/confusing as it was learning Portuguese with a basis of Spanish. But I just think it's beautiful, and I would love to really probably be able to understand it in Italy in general. It's just, so now, I don't need any more languages for professional reasons. So I feel like if I'm going to learn more languages, it's just going to be one that I think is absolutely lovely. Because, potentially one day, like a language with a different alphabet. My little brother speaks fluent Arabic.
Wow.
And he's currently in the States, but I'm sure he's going to end up back in some kind of Arabic-speaking country. So maybe at that stage, I would at least try and get a bit of a grasp of Arabic to go and visit him. But no, I tried to learn Japanese when I was 16 or 17, and that did not go well. So I've kind of been a bit scared of non-Romance languages ever since.
That's fair enough. My question to you, I guess, and as and when you decide to pick up Italian, for example, because I feel like, you've got Duolingo, you've got Rosetta Stone that are kind of the go-tos for a lot of people, and Netflix. But if you were to start learning a language afresh now, what would be your thought process about going about learning it?
I would sign up for a class straight away, I think, directly, structured learning. And for me, it would also have to be in person, because I was actually doing a refresher course of advanced Portuguese when the pandemic started last year, and it carried on online. And no, it didn't happen. I think I carried on going to the classes for a couple of weeks and then just completely tailed off. I need to be there, have that discipline, have that interaction. So for me, it would be an old-fashioned classroom with a teacher would be where I would start.
No, that's fair enough. That's good advice. Definitely good advice. Okay, we're going to talk about Brexit. Has Brexit affected your business or lifestyle in any way, or do you think it could do in the longer term? And I don't mean that in a like crazy impending doom kind of way, but just sort of, is there anything that you're kind of thinking strategically in the back of your mind, I probably need to be aware of this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the main indirect impact of Brexit before it actually happened was having to register as self-employed here in Spain, which does mean that I've got some very hefty social security payments. They're not kind to self-employed people over here. So that was, if it hadn't been for Brexit, maybe I would have kind of gone another couple of years still paying taxes in the UK and like everyone did. But yes, now social security payments are fine. But other than that, it's just kind of concerns for the future. And my partner's Spanish, so if we did decide we wanted to move back to the UK, how would that work with him? And then if he were to get work elsewhere in Europe, for example, because he's a university professor, how would that work with me? I've got my temporary residency here in Spain, but that doesn't allow me to live and work in the rest of Europe. So what the logistics would be for all that is just all going to be a lot more complicated from here on out. And we just had it so easy, didn't we? Never had to worry about these things.
Again, would there be any place that you would recommend going to read up about this stuff? Because of course we have the big old internet that is a whole fountain of all the knowledge and no knowledge. So what would be the best place to go to?
I do, like anyone, I find it hard to like keep up with the developments and things. There are certain Twitter accounts that I follow that like specifically about Britain and Europe and Britain and Spain, and they're great places to actually get the news that's relevant to people like me or anyone living abroad. Things like recently when they're deciding whether or not people that have been vaccinated in Europe can go back to the UK, whether their vaccines count, blah, blah, blah. That's all, you can't find news about it anywhere. So you have to really dig to find out the information that's relevant to you. Yeah, it's not easy.
Not easy, but the effort is worth it, I've found.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Love it. Amazing.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Remote Worker. And thank you, Katie, for sharing your experiences and tips. You can find links to Katie's website below. Tag Katie at Katie Uniacke and myself, Han, at Han Meets World, and let us know which language you'd love to learn next. You can also find the podcast on Instagram at The Remote Worker Podcast. Thank you so much again for listening, and we can't wait to remote work with you again soon.